The limousine arrived at 6:47 in the morning. Zara Mensah stood on the sidewalk in front of the staffing agency with two things: a black duffel bag containing everything she owned that mattered, and a phone number she had memorized and never called. The phone number belonged to the man in the car. She had known his name for 17 years. She had seen what it became. She had done the math on the distance between who he was and what the number meant, and she had decided 17 years ago that the math didn't work in her favor. And then the agency had offered her the placement. Kang Dong-hyun, private estate, Hanam-dong, live-in domestic staff. She had sat with the offer for 3 days before saying yes. Told herself it was the salary. Told herself it was the live-in arrangement, the most practical solution to a housing situation that had stopped being sustainable. Told herself all the things you tell yourself when you know the real answer and aren't ready to say it. The driver opened the rear door. She got in. The man inside was sitting in the way she recognized, perfectly still, watchful, the specific quality of attention that had not changed in 17 years even though everything else had. He looked at her the moment she sat down, and she watched it happen across his face. Not slowly, all at once. The wall cracking. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She had prepared for many things. She had not prepared for the specific expression of a man watching a memory become real. The way he stopped being Kang Dong-hyun, the name that made Seoul's underworld lower its voice, and became for one unguarded second just the boy who had sat beside her on a cold concrete step and said, "You saved my life." He reached up and touched the scar on his left hand. The crescent-shaped one, small and pale, between his index finger and thumb.
She had put it there. She had been 11 years old, and he had been 8, and she had wrapped a strip of her shirt around his bleeding hand on a playground in Mapo-gu and told him, "I've got you.
I've got you.
Welcome to this channel. And honey, some people find you no matter how far you run from them. Some promises don't expire. They just wait. Like this video if you felt that.
Subscribe.
We are just beginning. Let's go back to the beginning. Zara Mensah had been 11 years old, recently arrived in Seoul from Accra, and already fluent in the specific mathematics of being a child in a system that wasn't designed for her. Her mother had come to Korea for work and had stayed because the work kept extending and because Zara's school was good and because Seoul had become, incrementally, home. Her mother worked long hours. Zara was self-sufficient in the specific way that children of working single parents became self-sufficient, not because anyone decided she should be, but because necessity made the decision. She used the park near their apartment after school. She liked the park because it was loud enough that she could think without the apartment's quiet getting heavy. On a Tuesday in October, she arrived at the park to find 3 older boys surrounding a smaller one near the chain-link fence at the back. The small boy was maybe 8,
Korean,
sharp-featured and thin, wearing clothes that were slightly too big, the specific fit of donated items. He was not crying. He was standing very still in the way people stood when they had learned that movement attracted more pain. One of the older boys grabbed his hand and shoved it into the fence.
hard.
The kind of hard that split skin. Zara had crossed the park before she consciously decided to. She was 11 and a girl and smaller than all 3 of the older boys, and she had set down her backpack and told them in her clearest voice, the one her mother used for negotiations, the one that didn't waver, that she would scream loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear unless they left. She would tell every adult she could find exactly what they had done. She would follow them until someone listened. They had looked at her. They had calculated. They had left. People always underestimated children who had already learned the world wouldn't protect them and had decided to protect themselves. She crouched down beside the small boy. His hand was bleeding from the knuckle, not severely, but steadily. She tore a strip from the hem of her t-shirt. Her mother would be annoyed about the shirt, but this was not the moment for that calculation, and wrapped it around his hand with the careful efficiency of someone who had been patching her own injuries since she could reach the medicine cabinet. "Does it hurt a lot?" He looked at her with dark, serious eyes.
"It hurts," he said.
"But less now."
"I'm Zara," she said.
"I'm Yeo-jun," he said. Then, carefully, in English that was clearly newly learned and taken very seriously, People call me June. Do you live near here, June? A pause. I am visiting. My family came from Busan. Another pause, shorter. I don't have, my parents are not with me. I am with my uncle. She understood, from the way he said it, that the uncle was not a person who noticed when small boys bled. You should clean this properly when you get home, she said, tying off the strip of shirt. With soap. Or, it will get infected. He looked at his wrapped hand. Then at her. His expression was the specific combination of surprise and something else, gratitude, and something more complicated than gratitude, the look of someone filing a person underimportant before they fully understood why.
Thank you, he said.
The English words careful and deliberate, like he wanted to get them exactly right. You're welcome, she said. She went back for her backpack. When she turned around, he was still watching her with those serious eyes. Will you be here tomorrow? He asked. Probably, she said. After school. He was there the next day. And the day after. For 2 weeks, they met at the park. Zara, who could do her homework anywhere, and June, who, she gradually understood, was in Seoul because his uncle had business here and who had no one his age to be with and who seemed to treat their daily meeting as the most important appointment in his schedule. He was learning English from a workbook he carried in his jacket pocket. He asked her to correct his pronunciation. She asked him to teach her Korean words she couldn't learn from her school's curriculum, the informal ones, the useful ones, the ones that meant something specific about how people actually talked. They shared snacks. She packed extras sometimes, understanding without being told that he was probably not eating enough. He accepted without the humiliation that adults brought to accepting food they needed, because children who needed things had not yet learned to perform, not needing them. On the last day, she didn't know it was the last day. He had been quieter than usual. She had asked what was wrong. We go back to Busan tomorrow, he said. Her stomach had dropped in the specific way of children facing abrupt endings.
Oh.
I will remember you, he said. The English deliberate and serious, the way he said everything. I will remember you exactly. She had looked at this 8-year-old boy who had said it hurts, but less now, and filed her under important and learned English words specifically to use with her, and she had felt something she wouldn't have a name for until she was considerably older.
Me too, she said.
I'll remember you exactly. His uncle had called from across the park. He had stood up, brushed off his clothes, picked up his workbook. Zara, he said, turning back, once.
Yeah?
Thank you for the park. She had watched him walk away and thought, I will see him again. The way you thought things when you were 11 and still believed the world organized itself toward the outcomes that should happen. She had not seen him again for 17 years.
She had thought about him, though.
The specific way you thought about people who had made a brief but significant impression, not constantly, not with a focused attention of grief, but in the background, the way an important thing settled into the architecture of memory rather than sitting in the foreground demanding acknowledgement. She had Googled his name when she was 25, idly, the way you Googled people from your childhood. The results had stopped her cold. Kang Dong-hyun, 22 years old, already the subject of careful journalistic circumlocution, connected to organizations operating outside conventional legal frameworks. Later searches, as she got older and as he became more powerful, were less circumspect. The man who had rebuilt the Kong syndicate after his father's death. The man called Hyukpyeong, Black Wall, because nothing penetrated him and nothing moved him. She had closed those searches. She had told herself the 8-year-old boy in the park was not this. Or rather, the boy had become this, and the becoming had put a distance between then and now that was not navigable. She had built her own life in the years between. A good one, mostly. She had worked in event logistics, had been good at it, had been building towards something sustainable. And then the company had folded in the way that companies folded, and the savings she'd had were less than she'd thought, and she was 31, and in Seoul, and looking at options that were either insufficient or impractical. The staffing agency had been on her phone for 3 months before she called them. She had recognized the name on the placement listing immediately. Had sat with it for 3 days, had told herself all the stories about why this was a coincidence, why this was simply the best option, why the presence of his name on the listing was irrelevant to her decision to accept it. Then she had called the agency and said yes, and told herself that what she was really doing was practical. She had also, the evening before the pickup, allowed herself the honesty that she had been refusing. She was going because 17 years was long enough to wonder. Because she had been carrying the specific texture of those 2 weeks, the playground, the shared snacks, the English workbook, I will remember you exactly for more than half her life, and she needed to know whether the person those memories belonged to still existed somewhere inside the man the searches described. She had no plan. She was not naive enough to think the recognition would lead anywhere.
She simply needed to know.
The limousine arrived at 6:47 and she got in and sat down, and Kang Dong-hyun looked at her across the dark leather cabin, and she watched the wall crack. He said nothing that first morning. He offered her his handkerchief. The silk was warm from his jacket pocket, and she understood without explanation that warmth was the point. He said, "You're cold." She said nothing. He looked at her hands, which were shaking slightly, and something moved across his expression that she couldn't fully read. The estate was everything the listing had understated. Marble, glass, height, the specific architecture of someone who had built their environment to communicate permanence and untouchability. She was given a room that was larger than anywhere she'd lived in 2 years. She was told by the household manager, a composed woman named Mrs. Gu, that she had complete access to the staff areas and that the family areas were to be treated with discretion. She began the work. She was good at it. She had always been organized, detail-oriented, the kind of person who found order soothing to create. She cleaned and arranged and managed the supply schedules with the focus of someone who was also underneath the focus, paying attention to everything. She was waiting to see if he would say something.
He did not say something.
He moved through the estate with the specific deliberateness of someone managing every variable of his own environment. He looked at her when he passed her in corridors, the focused attention that she recognized from the park, that quality of filing things under important, but he said nothing beyond the formalities that his role required. On the 4th day, she was cleaning the main study when she found it. On the 3rd shelf, at eye level, was an English workbook. Cheap, the kind sold at bookstores near international schools. The spine was broken, the pages worn soft from handling. Several pages were dog-eared. She opened it to the front. Inside, in handwriting that was clearly a child's, careful, deliberate, taking each letter seriously, were the English words for things a child would need. "Hello."
Thank you.
"You're welcome."
Please.
"I don't understand."
Can you help me?
And at the bottom of the first page, in slightly larger letters, "Zara teaches me this." She closed the workbook, put it back exactly where she'd found it, stood in the study for a moment, breathing carefully. He had kept it for 17 years, through whatever moves and transformations and the building of an empire that made Seoul's underworld step carefully. He had kept a child's English workbook with her name in it. She went back to work. She did not say anything. On the 7th day, they reached for the coffee pot at the same time. It was early, 6 in the morning, the kitchen quiet, the estate still. He had come in from somewhere. She didn't ask from where. She had been reviewing the week's supply order. They both moved toward the counter simultaneously, and she reached past him for the pot, and the sleeve of his shirt pulled back, and she saw the scar.
Small. Pale.
Crescent-shaped, between his index finger and his thumb on his left hand. She stopped moving. He went very still. The stillness of someone who knows what is about to happen and is holding themselves in place, so as not to startle it away.
"June," she said.
Barely sound. "Zara," he said. The kitchen was very quiet. He told her how long he had known. "From the moment the agency sent your photograph," he said. They were sitting at the kitchen counter now, the coffee forgotten. The morning light came through the east-facing windows and made the marble look warmer than it was. "I recognized your face. You hired me knowing." "Yes." She looked at him. At this man who was 31 to her 31, who had the same serious dark eyes but in a face that had been made harder by years she could only partially imagine. "Why didn't you say something?" "I didn't know how." The admission was direct and clean, the way he had always said things. "I didn't know if you knew it was me. I didn't know if you wanted to." "I knew," she said. "Not at first. I recognized the name, but not certainty. When I saw the scar I knew. And before the scar?" She considered this honestly. "I suspected. I came here partly because I suspected." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite relief, something more complicated.
"Why?"
17 years is long enough to wonder whether a person still exists, she said.
The searches told me what you became.
They didn't tell me whether you were still in there. He was quiet for a moment. And, you kept the workbook, she said simply. With my name in it. The admission landed. She watched him absorb it, the specific way of a person who had been very careful about what they revealed about themselves suddenly understanding that the most careful thing they kept had already spoken. I kept it because it was evidence, he said finally. Of what? That I was someone before this. He looked at his hands, the scarred one. That there was a version of me that someone was kind to without wanting anything. That, he stopped. Started again. You were the first person who protected me when you had no reason to. I was 8, and I didn't have anything you needed. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. Your mother used the same logic, she said quietly. When she was teaching you. He looked at her.
You told me, she said.
At the park. You said your mother taught you that protecting people who couldn't protect themselves was the most important thing a person could do.
A beat.
You told me that's why you were going to be strong. So you could protect people. He was very still. I haven't thought about that in years.
I know.
I could tell from the searches. The honesty of it hung between them. She did not say it to wound him. He did not take it as a wound. He took it the way he had always taken true things, with the specific gravity of someone who valued accuracy over comfort. Why did you really come? He asked. She had prepared to give the practical answer. She gave the true one instead. Because I've been carrying those 2 weeks for 17 years, and I needed to know whether the person those memories belonged to was still real. And because she started again. Because when you left, you said you would remember me exactly. And I believed you. And I needed to know if that was true, or if it was something 8-year-olds said. It was true, he said. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one.
I can see that. Zara.
He said her name the way he had said English words at the park, carefully, giving it the weight it was due. I spent a long time becoming someone who didn't need anything, who didn't allow anything close enough to matter. I thought that was strength. He looked at the workbook shelf, even though it wasn't visible from here. And then the agency sent your photograph, and I looked at your face, and I couldn't.
He stopped.
Couldn't what? Couldn't remember why I had decided not to need anything, he said. Couldn't remember what the point of the walls was exactly if you were on the other side of them. The ring appeared on the 17th day. She found it on her cleaning cart, not wrapped, not presented, just placed there with the specific lack of ceremony that characterized how he did everything that mattered to him. A copper wire ring. Twisted by hands that had been more patient at 8 than they were now, the loops slightly uneven, the setting that held the piece of green sea glass slightly crooked. She picked it up, held it up to the hallway light. The sea glass caught it and threw it back in the same green she remembered from the park. She had found a piece just like it once on a school trip to the coast and had shown it to him and said it looked like something from the bottom of the ocean. She had not been able to tell him, then, that she was putting the piece in her pocket to keep. She was still holding the ring when he appeared in the hallway. He had clearly been waiting nearby, not in a way that was predatory, but in the way of someone who needed to see the moment land. You made this, she said. I tried. His voice was even, but she could hear the layer underneath it. My hands are worse at it now than they would have been then. The proportions are. It's perfect, she said. He looked at her. It's not technically perfect, she said. But that's not what perfect means. He crossed the hallway. He held out his hand. She put the ring in his palm. He took her left hand and slid it onto her fourth finger, and it fit, imperfectly, meaningfully, exactly as it should. I owe you something, he said. I've owed it since I was 8 years old. You don't owe me anything. You protected me when you had nothing to gain. You gave me your time and your attention, and you tore your shirt for me without calculating whether it was worth it. His voice was low and precise. I have spent 17 years becoming powerful enough that no one could hurt me the way I was hurt that day. And I forgot somewhere in the building that the point wasn't power.
The point was you.
She looked at the ring on her finger. Don't forget again, she said.
I won't, he said.
I put it in a workbook so I wouldn't forget it. I'll find a better method this time. The dinner happened 3 days later. He had warned her that it was coming, a quarterly meeting of the organization's senior associates, held at the estate, at which the household staff served. She had the option to be reassigned to other duties. He had made this clear without pressure, giving her the choice. She had said she would serve. She had her own reasons. 14 men arrived in armored cars with security details who bristled with restrained violence. She moved through the dining room with the focused efficiency she brought to all physical tasks, placing plates and pouring wine, and making herself invisible in the way she had learned, over years of event work, was actually a skill, not erasure but the deliberate withdrawal of attention. She had almost made it through the evening. It was the wife who created the incident. The wife of a man named Director M, a woman in her 50s who wore the specific confidence of someone accustomed to occupying spaces where others made themselves small. She had watched Zara through the first 2 courses, had leaned toward her husband with something at the third. At the fourth, she addressed Zara directly. "That ring," she said conversationally, as Zara set down her plate. "Is that copper?" "Yes, ma'am." "How unusual." The tone of a woman who considered unusual synonymous with inferior. "It looks handmade. Did you make it yourself?" "It was a gift." From someone equally, a pause, deliberate. "Resourceful?" She saw Dong-hyun's hands tighten on his chopsticks at the head of the table.
"From someone important to me," Zara said.
Her voice was even. The woman's smile sharpened. Domestic staff receiving handmade jewelry from their employer. How charming. The word landed like a small blade. One does wonder about the nature of that arrangement. The table had gone quiet in the way of people who smelled conflict and were deciding whether to engage or observe. Zara looked at her. She thought about 11 years old and a playground, and the clear voice she had used to face down 3 older boys who were bigger than she was. "The ring," she said quietly, "was made by someone who had nothing to give except his intention to keep a promise. Your diamonds were purchased with money. This was made with time and attention and the specific care of a person who wanted to get it right." She held the woman's gaze. "I'll take the second kind." The silence that followed was absolute. What happened next happened very fast. The woman's hand shot out, not to hurt, but to humiliate, to grab Zara's wrist and pull the ring into the light for the table's examination. The serving tray tilted. Zara's balance went. And the ring, knocked by the sudden jerk, slipped from her finger. It rolled across the marble floor in a perfect arc and disappeared into the heating vent in the corner of the room. The sound Zara made was involuntary, a small, sharp exhale of loss that she couldn't prevent. She went to her knees at the vent without thinking, fingers working at the grate. "No, no, no." A voice at the head of the table. "Get out." Not loud. The voice Dong-hyun used for things that were final. She heard chairs scraping, voices objecting. His voice again, quiet, carrying the specific weight of a man who never needed volume to be heard. "You have 30 seconds to leave this room, or I will remove you myself." Rapid exits. The sound of a dinner ending badly. And then he was beside her on the floor. Not standing over her. On his knees beside her. His expensive suit on the marble, his hand over hers where she was trying to pry the grate. "Stop," he said gently. "You're going to hurt your hands." "It's in there," she said. "I have to." "I'll get it back," he said. "I put it on your finger with my own hands. I'm not sending someone else to get it back." He turned to the security detail frozen at the walls. "Screwdriver."
"Now."
The screwdriver arrived in under 2 minutes. The room was empty except for them and the security detail who stood in uncomfortable attention at the perimeter, witnessing something that none of their training had prepared them for, their employer on his knees on a marble floor, working a corroded vent screw with the focused patience of someone for whom this was the only task in the world. "You don't have to," Zara started. "I made it with my hands," he said. Not arguing, just stating. "I put it on your finger. I'm getting it back." The first screw came free. He moved to the second. "The organization will talk about this," she said. "You just threw 14 people out of your dining room."
"Yes."
"Because of a ring. Because of what the ring is." He said it without looking up from the screw. "And because of what they were doing to the person wearing it." A beat. "Those are not small reasons." The second screw. The third. "I watched you for years," she said quietly. After I left Seoul the first time. After the searches started returning results. She looked at her hands in her lap. I watched you become something I didn't recognize and I thought, the boy at the park is gone. I thought he had to be gone because people don't survive what the searches said you survived and come out the same. He stopped moving for a moment, then continued. And you kept the workbook, she said. And you made the ring. And you just got on the floor to retrieve a piece of copper wire that costs less than the screwdriver you're using. She looked at him. He's not gone. The fourth screw released. He lifted the grate carefully and produced his phone, turned on the light, angled it into the shaft. There, 2 feet down, caught on a seam where the vertical met the horizontal, the ring. The sea glass catching the light. He reached in. His shoulder pressed flat to the floor, his arm disappearing to the elbow. She heard him breathe out as his fingers found it. He drew his arm back slowly, carefully, and opened his hand. Tarnished copper wire. Slightly crooked setting. Green sea glass, scratched at one corner from its journey. She was crying. She hadn't noticed when she started. He looked at the ring and then at her, and for the first time since the morning in the limousine, she saw the wall completely down, not cracked, not managed, simply gone. The person who had looked at her from the park bench, at 8 years old, and filed her under important. I'm sorry, he said, his voice not quite even. I'm sorry I became someone you had to search for inside someone else. I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry the first thing I could think of to do when the agency sent me your photograph was to hire you and wait for you to find out, instead of just
Calling me, she said. Calling you.
You had my number. I had your number for 4 years, he said. I found it before I found the photograph. I wrote it down and didn't call it because he stopped. Because I didn't know how to be worth calling, he said. I knew what I had become. I knew what the searches said. I thought if I called you and you knew what I was, you would. I already knew, she said. I knew before I said yes to the placement. He looked at her. I said yes anyway, she said. Because the person who kept a workbook with my name in it for 17 years was worth knowing, regardless of everything else. She held out her hand. He put the ring back on her finger. It settled back into the groove it had worn in those 3 days, as if it had always been there and was simply returning. She tried to leave at 4 in the morning. She had packed her bag with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been prepared for this outcome, a contingency she'd had ready since day one, the exit that didn't require anyone's permission. She was in the service corridor with her bag over her shoulder when the lights came on. He was at the end of the corridor, still in the clothes from the dinner, slightly dusty from the floor. He looked at the bag. He looked at her. The organization will retaliate, she said. I'm a visible vulnerability now. Last night made sure of that.
Yes.
If I stay, I'm a target.
Yes.
And you're asking me to stay anyway. I'm asking you to make the choice with full information, he said. Not because staying is safe. It isn't. Not because it will be simple. It won't. He crossed the corridor toward her. I'm asking you because I spent 17 years building a wall, and you spent 3 weeks finding the boy underneath it, and I would like to spend the time I have left being that person rather than the wall. She looked at him, at the scar on his hand, at the ring on her finger. If I stay, she said, I'm not the maid.
No. Certain.
You're not. And if your people can't accept that, then they'll learn, he said. The way people learn things in my world. Not through preference. Through understanding that some things are not negotiable. She set the bag down, not dropping it. Setting it down deliberately, the way you set down something you have been carrying for a long time and have decided you are done carrying. I kept your photograph too, she said. I took one at the park, that last day. On my phone. It's blurry, I was 11, I didn't know how to frame a shot. She looked at him. But I kept it. Every phone I've had since, I've transferred it over. He was quiet. You were serious even then, she said. You had that look. Like everything you saw was something you were deciding whether to keep. She paused. I always wondered if you kept me. I kept you, he said.
Exactly.
She looked at the corridor. At the estate around them. At the man who had built a fortress and put a workbook in it. We'll figure out the rest, she said.
Yes.
But right now I want rice, she said. Simple rice. The way we used to make it on the camp stove my mother kept for the rainy season, when everything else was too complicated. Something happened to his face. The thing she had been watching emerge across the weeks, the specific expressiveness of a person who had stopped managing their own face. I have rice, he said. The cheap kind. I keep it in the bottom of the refrigerator. I know, she said. I found it on day 2. He almost smiled. Did you judge me for it? I put extra kimchi next to it, she said. No note. In case you needed it. He looked at her for a long moment. You've been taking care of me since I was 8 years old, he said. You've been keeping evidence of me since you were 8 years old, she said. That seems like an even exchange. They walked to the kitchen together. The estate was quiet around them, the security detail making themselves appropriately invisible, the night giving way to the specific gray of soul before dawn. He got out the rice. She got out the kimchi. They worked side by side at the counter without needing to coordinate it, moving around each other in the way of people who had been learning each other's rhythms for weeks and were now simply acknowledging what they had learned. The rice cooker hummed. The city outside was beginning its day. Later, sitting at the counter with 2 bowls between them and the copper ring on her finger and the workbook visible from where they sat, Zara said, Will you teach me Korean properly? Not the school version. The real version. He looked at her. You've been in Seoul for... I know enough to get by, she said. I want to know more than enough. I want to know the words that mean something specific. She turned her bowl in her hands. The way you tried to learn English specifically, so you could talk to me. He was quiet for a moment. I'll teach you, he said. And I'll correct your English, she said. Your pronunciation has gotten worse since you were 8. He looked at her with an expression that was, she was almost certain, the beginning of a smile. My pronunciation is fine. It's not. The rice cooker beeped. The dawn came through the kitchen windows in the clean white gold of early morning, the kind that made everything look new. She thought about the playground, about the strip of shirt, the wrapped hand, I've got you, about an 8-year-old boy who had said I will remember you exactly, and had apparently meant it absolutely, through every version of himself between then and now. About 17 years of searching for someone inside someone else, and finding them. She looked at him across the kitchen counter. He was already looking at her, with the same focused attention he had given her at 8 on a park bench, the same quality of this is important, I am keeping this.
Good morning, she said. Good morning, he said.
Seoul moved on outside the windows, entirely indifferent. And the kitchen smelled like rice and like dawn and like the specific warmth of a promise that had been kept across 17 years and a copper wire ring and a child's English workbook and 2 people who had decided, separately and then together, that some things were worth finding their way back to. Ready? He said, nodding at the bowls. Ready, she said. They ate breakfast. For everyone who kept a blurry photograph on every phone they've had since they were 11, this story was for you. For everyone who wrapped a stranger's hand and didn't know they were wrapping their own future, this one too. Like this video if some promises are worth 17 years. Subscribe if you stayed to the end. Drop a comment. Did you know from the limousine moment, or did you need the kitchen? I'll see you in the next story. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.